pastor here at Wayfarers Christian Church. I'm joined today by my buddy Noah Randolph. He's our teaching pastor here.
Hey.
We are back for our weekly deep dive podcast. How are you doing, Noah? How are you feeling today, man?
I'm doing all right. I've had a whole lot of coffee, about 500 grams of it, and I've had now a whole lot of tea, so I'm very caffeinated right now. So this will be a fun episode.
All right.
Hey, we're live. Cool.
I am not nearly as caffeinated, but I'm feeling somewhat dehydrated. So I've got this extra large FedEx Grizzlies cup full of ice water. I'm going to try to not be that like annoying guy that's like slurping on the microphone the whole time.
That's fair. I
think the hydration is just as important maybe, and keeping the energy up. But
there's a phrase that we would say at Avenue all the time. It was started mainly by Becca, but it was the phrase "hydrate or dihydrate," and I've always
hydrate or dihydrate.
I've always loved that phrase, hydrate or dihydrate. That's one thing I'll take away with me for the rest of my life. I'll be telling my kids that, hey, don't forget, kids, hydrate or dihydrate.
So we're trying to live that out in real life here. But before we get started, I mentioned in my sermon on Sunday, especially if some of you had been watching, that we had been having some weird medical issues with our son, Toby, me and my wife Adrian, our son Toby. He had been having these weird, almost like epileptic seizure-like symptoms that were really concerning. We went to the doctor. They had sent us to a neurologist. There was all kinds of scary stuff. It was a scary week there for a little bit while we were waiting for the doctor's appointment and everything else. And I mentioned just that was on my mind. I was asking for prayer. I wanted to not leave you guys hanging. Go ahead and let you give you the update. We did get good news. Thank you to all of you that were praying and joining in with us in that. We went to get to the doctor, got his results back. All the scans came back normal. Everything looks normal. They didn't see any signs of anything serious, any sort of serious epileptic condition or anything like that. They think he does have a very rare condition called shudder attacks or shudder spells, which is super rare. Like one in like however many 100,000 kids end up with it, but it's rare, but it's benign. It's not something to worry about. They were very adamant. They were just like, it's a completely benign condition. He should be fine. So that was incredibly good news.
That's so
feeling
awesome.
Like a different person, after getting that good news back.
I have the distinct pleasure to get to talk with you off camera all the time, and I know just how much of a stress that was all the week long up to this point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I unfortunately, maybe it's just a part of my personality. It's that Enneagram 3-ness sometimes, but I'm really good at just keep on trucking along, doing my job. I'm not one of those people who has my performance suffer too much when I have situations like that going on. But if you know me really well, you will see that even though I'm still getting work done, I'm not all there. Like my head's not all there, my brain's not all there.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely had a lot of things on my mind the last week. It's I wish I could say this is the first time, but it's just one of the first times where we've had some medical worries. And I've joked before, I'm a hypochondriac anyways. I'm the guy that Googles everything, is always convinced that I have the worst of everything that's going on. I've been trying to deal with it in my own life, but it's a whole different situation when it's your kids and you're like concerned for them and all. So I'm still, getting the hang of what that dad life is like, but that's where we're at right now. But either way, I didn't want to just like not address that and then just get right
just
into
drop that bomb on us.
Yeah. Thankfully, Lord is good to us and looks like he is going to be fine. So
that's awesome.
That was really good news all around.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get our quirky queries out of the way then.
Yeah.
I have one that I'm not going to be impressed with at all when I ask it, but I think there are a lot of people that watch that will be impressed by your answer. I am not an NBA fan whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
But the question is, if you were given the head coaching job of, let's just say, the Memphis Grizzlies, since we're in Memphis, who would you draft? Like, what's your 5-star all-star draft?
Interesting.
Like if you had like the
like
ability,
of all time, like every player that's ever existed.
Well, no. Just like
currently
right now, who would you draft for your top 5 starters? What is like what's your like? Who do you think is like really what you want on a team right now?
I understand now why you said I can't ask this question back to you.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna know any of these players.
Dude, I'm such a like homer. Like I'm all about like the home team, and like I'm just a blind fan of the home team regardless of whatever. So my 2 top players are the 2 top Grizzlies players right now, even.
Okay.
Which is Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.
Okay.
They're probably not even close to like the top best players in the NBA or anything, but I just love both of those guys. I love everything they're about. I love the way they play. I think they have the potential to be incredible. So a lot of people would just be like, why the heck would you pick those guys? But I'm like, no, I love those guys. I love that they're on the team. I still want both of them on my team specifically. I also have this interesting thing where it's partly just being the like underdog Grizzlies fan most of my life. I don't care for a lot of the big NBA stars, the names that everybody knows about.
So
and
like
all that.
Kevin Durant's one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin Durant's possibly my least favorite player in the NBA. For a lot of reasons. We could get into that other times. LeBron James, same way. You know, he's Kevin Durant, LeBron James, those would be like your top 2 for most people, and I don't think I would even have them on my team, even though I can't deny their talent, can't deny their skill.
Yeah.
I like guys that are more like team players, more like system players who can kind of do a lot of different things. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm just not much of a big like go for the stars kind of guy.
Yeah. So you got 2 that are already on.
I also
team.
would really love. I love one of the players that. This is going to contradict what I said before, but one of the stars I've always loved is Steph Curry.
Oh, okay.
And I still would want him,
So
even though he's a huge star.
You'd try and get him.
It's a very small team already at this point. I would. There's another player I really like named Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's another big player right now. He just signed this massive contract today. Like it was like the biggest contract in NBA history, $228 million.
Whoa!
So he makes like $500,000 per game.
That's
at this
insane.
point. But he has a super cool story. He's a Greek player, African descent. So like his parents are from Africa. He grew up in Greece, plays in the States. Is just like this awesome like underdog story, came from nowhere, and you know is now like one of the coolest players in the NBA. And so you got Steph, you got Jaren, you got Giannis, Ja.
Got one more.
And this is everything I've mentioned is also, I have 2 point guards on the team, so like as far as position,
you'd have to figure out which one's like.
I have to figure things out a little.
Which
bit.
one's what is it? Guard, wing guard.
Yeah, I guess Giannis would play center and Jaren would play power forward. So I guess I need a small forward. I'm trying to think of just like other players that I've always really enjoyed. I don't know. You wouldn't think this question would be that hard, but
yeah, I'm sure like Aaron or Austin, if they're watching, are like, I got a name.
I know exactly who you need to pick. I don't know. I just feel like we need more shooting at this point, so I'm going to say Klay Thompson because he's the other Golden State Warrior, incredible, great shooter, and seems like a super chill guy as well. So
there you go.
I'm a big personality guy. Their personality goes a long way as to whether I like them or not.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
So
That sounds like a good team. I don't know really any of them, but stamp of approval with no one that knows anything about basketball.
That's a fun question.
All right, you got one for me?
Yeah. What decade, like all the different decades starting from the 50s, they each have their own characteristics to them. 50s, the 60s, the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just say between the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Which of those decades would you have wanted to live in if you weren't living right now?
Oh, dang.
Because I feel like I know you. I was just going to say what time period would you want to live in, but I feel like you would want to have gone either like way back in time or way in the future or...
Indoor plumbing is hard. Like
that's true.
The one
that's
thing
true.
is like, indoor plumbing is nice thing. And AC. And there's a lot of things.
But what vibe do you like between all those different decades?
Yeah, that's a better, yeah. Honestly, you didn't name the one that I really want.
What's the one you really want? Yeah.
The 20s.
The 20s?
Yeah, I love the 20s.
Is that like the roaring 20s?
The roaring 20s, yeah.
Okay. No, I'll take that one.
I love the idea. There's something that fits my like rebellion streak in me. I love the idea of like a government mandate that you can't drink alcohol and everybody really disobeying
just
that
goes
order.
for it.
Like it's just like one of those funny
widely
things to me.
disregarded.
Yeah, widely disregarded laws that just proves that government doesn't really have as much power as you think it does, Like if American people decide that law's stupid, they're not going to follow it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like
you've also liked the...
There's a lot of mystique around it, really. That's really what it boils down to is like the 1920s. Hemingway and Fitzgerald lived in that time in Paris. And as much as they're not like great people and they drank way too much, like just to be around them and to like see how they saw the world would be really cool. And yeah, Lewis was alive, and like, I think he ended up like, I can't remember if he converted in the 30s I think he converted in the 30s, but still to be in a time where like, Lewis's writing would also be really cool. And I don't know, Tolkien would be alive and like you could like really, I feel like the 20s, 30s and 40s, so much life happened. You had war, you had the Great Depression, like it still boggles my mind how much like life happened in those decades. So if I could pick
minus the technological
minus the
disadvantage. If it's just as far as the vibe,
exactly,
you like that the 20s into the 30s.
That they still say that we've never had a technological boom like the 1920s had, because the automobile was just such a game changer, I feel like the internet was our game changer, but like the automobile was the game changer for that period. And so I don't know, it's just one of those things. But
I feel you.
Rolls Royce, sleuth detective, just all that stuff. It's just the mystique around it's great. But yeah, I could talk forever about the 20s.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Now that you say that, I have no idea why I would have ever thought you would answer any decade besides that. It fits perfectly. That definitely makes sense. If I had to pick on that one, it's weird. I just style-wise, I really have always enjoyed the 50s.
Yeah.
But not like suburban post-war baby boomer, cookie cutter suburban 50s. I like the I guess it's maybe more like late 50s into the 60s, but kind of I loved the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright. He was I used to want to be an architect. That was my whole big thing. And so I spent forever talking. I did a research paper in school on Frank Lloyd Wright, and that sort of it's a buzzword these days, is mid-century modern, but it's this like sleek minimalism, modernism of the 50s that you see in a lot of like big urban areas at the time, is what I really, really enjoy.
Yeah.
But it was like colorful, and a lot of this office is this kind of furniture, these couches we're sitting on, and the like look and style of a lot of this, even this kind of like carpet, shag rug, carpet, and all this kind of stuff, is based on a lot of the looks and era of that like mid-century modern design. So design-wise and all that kind of stuff, I like that era for all those reasons. It is weird though, because I feel like when people say they like the 50s, everyone always is like, oh, so you like I don't know, Leave It to Beaver, like
or Happy Days,
clean cut, you know, like everybody's got like crew cuts, and the women all wear dresses and the men all wear suits.
Yeah,
that's not the aspect of it I like as much as I like the sort of artistic modernism of that age and of that time. I enjoy that a lot. So,
I the 50s for me was hard because that was also like the death of real cooking and the beginning of like processed food.
Yeah,
like everything went from like making
they started doing canned stuff.
and they started doing like cream of mushroom soup really took off in the 50s.
Yeah.
Like if you look at any recipe that has cream of mushroom soup in it, I guarantee you it came from the 50s.
Right.
And I hate cream of mushroom soup, but yeah.
Yeah, man. But it's so efficient. You gotta love the efficiency.
Fair. It is nice that you can just like plop a can of really gelatinous goo into a pan and just watch it cook.
It's the efficiency of it that I enjoy from that era. It's just the desire for efficiency.
Yeah, that sound is so appealing when it hits the pot too. It's like
that's funny. Looks like Adrian commented a little bit, and she said Tony Allen was a player she was mentioning. That would be my pick for small forward, but he's not. He's not in the NBA anymore, so he doesn't count.
Oh yeah. I did say like active.
Yeah,
right
active
now.
players.
Yeah. So
sorry, that's probably a super old comment. I just saw that coming through the stream here, but this goes for anybody who's watching live. One of the benefits of watching live, if you're tuning in here on Facebook, feel free to comment. We would love to start having a little bit more interaction and be able to answer more questions along the way. And we'd love to hear what you guys think about the different topics that we are addressing in these different episodes. Today we're taking a little bit of a different approach in the specific topic that we're looking at. This last Sunday was the third Sunday of Advent, which is kind of a different Sunday from a lot of the other Sundays of Advent. Advent usually focuses in on maybe more somber reflection and meditation, and some of those kind of emotions that relate to that.
Yeah.
This third Sunday is supposed to be kind of a reprieve, kind of a rest and a respite from that deep heaviness of the rest of Advent. And it is a season where you specifically lean into the joy that is experienced with the coming of the Messiah, the expectation of Jesus coming, the sort of joy that is being proclaimed at the coming of Jesus. That's kind of what this third Sunday is supposed to be focusing on. And it was a weird one for me personally.
Because it wasn't a joyful week for
It was hard to be joyful, just because I was worrying so much about these test results for Toby and everything going on. And so what I ended up doing was I just was preaching a sermon that was hopefully to help everybody else, but really I was trying to like preach to myself a little bit too. And it was like, how do you find joy in like dark seasons and dark times?
Yeah.
How can you find joy when it feels unnatural or when it feels like wrong for the season and for the time? How can you find joy in it? And I just went through all these like different practical ways that we can go through to try to find joy in our own lives, try to make sure that we still experience that joy even in the midst of darkness. And I thought it was important just because this year has been so heavy and dark for so many people.
Yeah.
And so because of that, that's why we both were so into the idea of really doing Advent, even though we're not necessarily from church traditions that observe an Advent season. We were both like, 2020 especially needs to be that year where we make room for those sort of emotions and make room for feeling
Yeah.
that way. But in the same way that 2020 has been so dark, it makes it one of those seasons where it feels weird to try to be happy in any way whatsoever,
Yeah.
especially this year. And of all of the things I mentioned, the thing I got the most response back from people and everybody really connecting with and all that kind of stuff was when I was just talking about how I have felt a little bit self-conscious about sharing just some simple joys in my own life, whether it's pictures of Toby. You know, I didn't want to just be that dad that's always posting pictures. Both me and Adrian have struggled with that. And how much it does feel like the world and the people around us are always trying to, like, get us to not post those, you know, like, people make fun of people who are just too, like, joyfully posting just the simple things in life.
Yeah, I was
bring
thinking
them
about,
pleasure.
like, if you think about it, like, who's the villain of Inside Out? The villain is joy. Like, if you think about it, like, it's joy that's got, I mean, she's also the protagonist, but she's also her own antagonist.
Yeah.
Like, she's too happy, and she
Yeah.
just, like, wants to fix everything because she's, like, too happy or whatever. And
Yeah.
I was just thinking about just how, like, the movie of Inside Out is, like, you need sadness to really, like, make joy meaningful.
Right.
And I'm not sure I agree with that, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. We both talked about this a little bit, and we even briefly touched on it last week.
Yeah.
Which was when we were asking the question, do you need to go through pain? And, you know, what do we make of the pain that we go through in our lives and all that kind of stuff?
Right.
And I think what I realized is that just joy and happiness and rejoicing and all those kinds of things are viewed as childlike, as in a derogatory way, you know, as, like, trivial, as, like, I don't really know the word I'm looking for. I guess it's idealistic.
Yeah.
You know? And that, like,
rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the realists, you know,
always come
are the ones that are like, well, because I used to joke about this all the time. Every single one of my friends who is a pessimist, who is just viewing things negatively, they always look at the dark side of life instead of the bright side of life. Anytime you accuse them and try to confront them about their pessimism, what's their response every time?
I'm a realist.
And I'm like, I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. And what's the implication of that? The implication is that if you are an optimist, you're not a realist. You're not living in the real world. You're not seeing things as they really are.
You're living in an imaginary world.
Absolutely. And I think that's what people struggle with a lot when we're trying to decide what are we going to, like, post online and stuff like that. We want to seem like deep people who really know the way the world really works. And, you know, and if we post too much about just these little simple things that bring us joy and pleasure in life, we can feel like we seem trivial and childish, and we're viewing the world through those rose-colored glasses and stuff like that. And we would rather present an image of ourselves as, like, mature and aware of how things work and aware of how the world really works, and you know, all kinds of various different things like that. And so we self-edit ourselves, I'm finding, lots of times, and don't allow ourselves to really just experience that true joy, because we are in this position where we think that we need to tamp that down a little bit if we're going to seem like real adults who know the way that the world really works.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like you. I'm just starting to get to this place to where I'm just kind of done with that. I don't know that that's true. I think that there is a way to really, really lean in to a joyful existence that is just so much better than the sort of pessimistic existence that I know that so many people experience. But I don't know, how would you kind of go about it? What would you say is the reason you're kind of starting to push back against that idea that joy clouds your vision of the way the world really works.
Yeah, that's great. I would say that a lot of the time when I was younger, I lived that life of a realist who really was a pessimist. And man, it's hard because there's so much truth in it, you know? Like you can look at very much like things that happen in your life and say that was bad, you know, and this is not working out for me, and this is a pain in my life, and this is a reality in my life. And you can really begin to take all of those things that are in your life, and you can begin to build building blocks of evidence against the world being the rosy-colored glass view. And as someone that read fantasy books as a kid, fantasy is all about painting the world as rose-colored. And when you compare your life to the life of a fantasy book, and I'll give a really tangible example of this. There's a lot of fantasy books in which a character will get depressed, and always 10 out of 10 always happens in the books with their best friend or someone that knows them very well just happens to walk in the door at the very moment that they're like at their like deepest, darkest, like most depressed state, and then they're like, "Oh, you're depressed, aren't you?" And the other person's like, "No, I'm not." And you're like, "Yeah, you are. Come on, let's go hang out or something like that, you know?" And basically there's always like the friend that comes along during that moment and pulls them out of it, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's great. And you like, you know, you read the book and your heart melts because like friendship and love and things like that. But in the real world, I've lived many nights where no one has done that in my life, you know?
No one pops in and is like, "Hey, we're going to take you out and you're not going to feel depressed anymore."
Exactly. Like, you know, it's just a straight reality is that you live 356 days of the year and sometimes people aren't there for you when you need them, you know? Like, it's just reality. And so you have to, I mean, there is the realist part of you that wants to say like, well, that's just, you know, how life is, and you know, it's not like the fantasy book, and everybody's just really lying to you when they say that your life can be joyful, you know. And I think what we do when you're in that mindset is you think all the time. It's an either all or nothing kind of binary. You know? It's like I'm either happy all the time or I'm sad all the time, you know, and that's kind of where your thinking is in terms of, and you don't really think about the fact that maybe I actually have never in that period, I never actually did actual math and asked like how many days of the year was I sad and how many days of the year was I happy, you know, or joyful.
Yep.
And I feel like if I had done that, I probably would have had an even 50-50 split, more so than probably the aggregate exaggerated, oh, the whole year was bad, you know, kind of mindset that I probably had.
Yep.
And so I think that a lot of times your brain actually tricks you into thinking that you're worse off than you really are.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think that a lot of the time learning that your brain does tend to like exaggerate how bad the situation is and pull you even down darker, makes me distrust pessimists a lot more, because I think that pessimists a lot of the time are living into a story that's built up over time. And as much as they may want to say they're realists, a lot of the time, here's what I'll say. Oftentimes, pessimistic people see the world as dark and ugly and sad because they're blinded to joy and aren't able to see joy because they've already made decisions that the world is dark. And when you start to actually look for joy and to look for happiness and actually believe that it's possible to be happy in every day of your life, it may not happen, but it's possible.
Yeah.
If you start to actually do that, you actually see a lot more of that joy in your life. And so I don't know. I feel like what the pessimist has always told me, the only thing in life you're guaranteed is pain, has not necessarily matched my life experience now.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. No, I think you summed it up perfectly. We actually had a similar conversation to this a few days ago, just the two of us. And I think you summed up the whole 3-hour conversation in like 10 minutes or whatever right there perfectly. So good job. I think you're right. We both acknowledge that there is pain in the world. And I definitely think that the Pollyanna rose-colored glasses people who are just looking at everything only as positive all the time are definitely missing the fact that there is pain in the world, which is why we think an Advent season is really helpful for a church, because it's a time to look and not turn away from some of that hurt and some of that pain and some of those heavy feelings in the world. And, there are fallen aspects of the world, so obviously that's going to happen, fallen people and all kinds of things. But I think what both of us have started to notice is that pessimistic people can be just as naive as the optimists that they are always criticizing.
Just as irrational. They're not the logical people they make themselves out to be.
Absolutely.
Is really what it is.
Absolutely. And you see often that they are ignoring, in the same way that an optimist ignores negative things, you see a pessimist often ignoring positive things in their life. And the world is broken. The world is bad. There's a lot of hurt and pain in the world, but there's also a lot of joy and goodness and things to rejoice over.
Yeah, and I will say, from my own experience, a lot of times I've been in situations where I've revealed my pain and suffering and my story of pain and suffering to a person, right? And 9 times out of 10, those people didn't respond in the way that I might necessarily have wanted. And it's nothing their fault. It's just how oftentimes when you tell a story of pain and suffering, it catches people off guard, especially if you appear to be a type of person that has everything together.
Right.
And so 9 times out of 10, I would tell my story of pain and suffering to a person, and they'd be like, "Oh," and then they'd learn specific details, and they'd be like, "Oh, and they wouldn't know how to deal with it." And I'll never forget the first time I opened up a lot of my story to your wife's mother, Renee.
Yeah.
I'll never forget opening up to her, and instead of her being shocked by the pain and that disengaging her from me and not being able to know how to respond, she just leaned in and was present in that moment with me. And I remember that I told her in that moment, I just had this feeling of this is the first time anybody's actually stayed with me in this moment, saying this story. And the feeling I had of sadness and despair every time I tell that story was completely erased and replaced with a feeling of love for her for being present in this moment. And so I told her, I was like, "I love you." And she told me, "I love you too." And after that experience, I realized that the emotions that I experienced there are 10 times more powerful and strong than the emotions of despair in the story itself, right? And when I realized that there is no comparison, that the experience of joy in that moment that I had saying "I love you" and receiving "I love you" back is so much more tangible and palpable and extreme than any of the worst depressive episodes I've ever had in my life. That was the moment that I realized the optimist really is on the right track, at least, because there is, in my own experience, there's way more power on the joy factor than there is on the sadness factor.
Yep. So they know they may be illogical sometimes, but one thing the optimist does know is they know the power of joy.
Right.
And how much more powerful in the end it is than all of the despair and sadness and negative feelings that often in the moment, in those deep, dark moments, those despair, those sadness, all those things, they feel like they are the most powerful things in the universe. There's nothing that's going to overcome.
Yeah. When you're actually suffering from that darkness, you think it's the most powerful thing in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, comparing those two experiences, it's night and day. Joy is so much more powerful.
So in that vein, we wanted to kind of practice what we preach a little bit and just kind of reflect and think on our own experiences in our lives with joy and different things like that. You what were you kind of thinking? I remember when you were kind of bringing this up.
Yeah. So like I in particular, in talking with you off camera, I feel like a lot of the time you have a unique perspective growing up in like a church background and really wrestling with your faith like intellectually a lot of the time. But it seems to me that unlike a lot of stories that I hear of kids that grew up in a Christian background, they generally have like a really bad family life, or just their family underneath was not great. And I know you and your family well enough to know that that's not your family. Like you have a great family, and like you grew up in a great environment, and I feel like your family really leaned into you and really nurtured you. You married into a great family. What for you, how to ask this question right? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, it seems to me most of the people our age don't have that story, right? And what are some of the reflections that you have living that story?
Absolutely. I gotcha.
And that I might necessarily, and many of the people that don't have that story could learn from, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot of directions we could take that. And I've thought about that a lot. Because it's a recurring theme in my life that I find when I have had those situations where I'm connecting with a friend over some sort of hurt or pain or something that they've had to go through in their life. I try to have empathy and understanding for them, but I definitely always have to acknowledge the fact that I've been very blessed to not have experienced that a lot of those things personally in my own experience. So a lot of that empathy over pain is more like just it's emotional, wanting to connect with you as another human being, but it's not necessarily something from my own lived experience. And I remember first feeling that tension a lot around Easter. My home church where I grew up, Eastwind Christian Church, they do this candlelight service on Good Friday. And I can't remember at this point now. It might be their Christmas Eve. No, I can't remember if it's either their Christmas Eve or their Good Friday service, but on both they do this kind of candlelight service. And I can't remember which one it is, but on one of them, what they do every year is they have they pick 3 people from the church to share their testimony, you know, like here's my story of how I came to Jesus and what Jesus means to me. And I was like 19. I had just started college. And the minister at our church, Jeff, he asked me if I would be one of the 3 people this year to share my story. And I had encountered this tension many, many times before, but it really, really came to a head at this point. Because you know how these kind of share your testimony moments go for most people. You know, it's these stories of like, man, I was an alcoholic, and I was, you know, drunk and passed out on the side of the road, and I just knew I had to give my life to Jesus around. And, you know, it's all these stories people give of like hitting rock bottom, you know. And they turn around and they decide
get their
to follow
life together,
Jesus. All this kind of stuff.
Very dramatic. Go down and then go back up.
But there's like there's always got to be the going down part, you know. And I just struggled with
the fact that you didn't have it down. You were a goody two shoes.
Absolutely. And so I wasn't really sure, and it was really funny. So what I ended up sharing, I basically preached a sermon. Because, you know, I guess I was going to be a preacher and didn't even know it back then, on some specific words of the Apostle Paul in
Philippians?
Yep.
That's usually the joy one. Hey.
Yep. But it's an interesting one. It's Philippians 3. And it's kind of a famous passage. You probably heard it before. If someone else thinks they have reason to put confidence in the flesh, I have more, he says. Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regard to the law, a Pharisee. As for zeal, persecuting the church. As for righteousness based on the law, faultless. But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. And my basic point was that all of the things that every Jew of that day and age wanted, they wanted to be the best kind of Pharisee. They wanted to be of the tribe of Benjamin. They wanted, that was everything that everyone was hoping for. And they were like, if I could have all of these things, I would be happy.
Right.
Paul had all of those things. And he said, it doesn't compare. Yeah. It's garbage compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus. And so that was the first way I kind of dealt with that tension, was just first off by bringing up the fact that it's what I told the people when I was sharing my story. I was like, I've been very blessed, I've fourth generation of ministers in my family I have all my own versions of the whole Hebrew of Hebrews, tribe of Benjamin, Pharisee stuff. But I did want to make it clear to them that the most valuable thing is knowing Christ, and it surpasses any of all of those things. And I have found that for a lot of people. It's weird. It's kind of counter to what we're saying, but I do really want to emphasize that. If this is not your story, if you are not somebody who has had all of these joyful things in your own life, but you know Christ Jesus as your Lord, you have the most valuable thing. You have the most important thing. Yeah. That's the thing that ultimately is the treasure that really counts in the very end of it all. And so I always feel like I have to start with that before I talk about anything like that, because what I want people to understand is that that I'm very thankful, very happy for all of the things that I have, but that's the most important thing in my life. The most important thing for anybody's life is just that joy of knowing Jesus, and that can kind of surpass any of all of those negative.
Basically, being blessed with all this doesn't matter at all. At the end, all that matters is the joy that you enter into with Jesus Christ, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And so it was really funny because I got off the stage after sharing that, and everybody was just like, "Oh man, you're gonna be a preacher just like your dad one day. That was great." And you preached for. I exegeted a passage as my testimony instead of sharing my own story, which is just the most on-brand Nick Griffin thing ever to do. But that's exactly what I did in that moment, and I got a lot of compliments for it afterwards and everything like that. But I definitely had felt that tension, and one of the ways I thought to resolve that tension was just to kind of let people know that
neither matters.
Don't feel guilty about or don't feel envious about it necessarily if you don't have it or anything like that, because what you do have is worth more than any of that. Yeah. I still believe that. I still think that's really important. But as I've grown up from that and kind of moved on to that, I have learned that I'm also doing a disservice sometimes by trivializing it, and that it's important to thank God for the things that he has given me and these blessings that he has given me. And I do think that having a lot of those blessings has set me up to be in a better place to be able to help other people. Kind of a weird example of that, my brother Jeremy, he's a school teacher in public schools right now in Memphis City Schools through the Memphis Teacher Residency, MTR. It's a really cool program. He's doing some really cool stuff teaching in the schools here in Memphis. And he was telling me about this training he was having with a group that was kind of helping them understand how to better teach in a lot of these more under-resourced inner city contexts that happen in a lot of the city of Memphis. And they pointed out that sometimes you might have a kid that's like falling asleep in class, you know?
Yeah.
And the knee-jerk reaction from a teacher is to try to wake them up because they need this education or whatever. But if you know their story, you might know that they're children in a single-parent household. Maybe they have a single mom that's trying to work like 2 or 3 jobs to keep them fed and a roof over their heads. And so they have to go to like a daycare or to a family member's house to be taken care of. And because of all of that, they may not be getting home till midnight every night by the time their mom's done with work and can finally go pick them up and bring them home and all that kind of stuff. And then they have to get up super early because maybe their bus stop is the first bus stop on the on the route.
Yeah.
And so just because of the circumstances, they rarely get a chance to sleep. So they were saying sometimes the best thing you can do as a teacher is just let them sleep. Like just understand that they don't have all of those same resources that you have. Meanwhile, I grew up with my dad driving me to work every day because he had a really flexible schedule and he could do that. And with both parents around and on a very standard schedule and all those kinds of things. And so what that meant is that I just had less excuse for that kind of stuff. I'm not the kind of person who could sleep in school and get away with it. But I was the kind of person who I did really well in school. I had all of the resources available to me to really succeed and really do well. And so what I've kind of learned from that a little bit is that with some of those blessings also comes like just an extra level of responsibility. Blessings also comes like just an extra level of responsibility of it, but and also just an extra level of ability to do more. So like I just have more energy, a kid who has more resources has more energy to learn. Somebody who has more blessings just has more to be able to bless others with. And so that's been one of the big things for me. A lot of times it's just I don't have a lot of that same emotional parental trauma that a lot of my friends have.
Yeah.
And so because I don't have that, I think I have the responsibility and just a greater ability to help them work through whatever may be going on in their life because I don't have all of that same baggage that may come with it. A big one for a lot of people who have like issues with their own fathers will have a lot of issues with connecting with God as a father.
Right.
But as somebody who has not had those issues with my own father, I'm able to connect with God in that way. And so hopefully I can start to show them some of the benefits of that. And so, just more generally, I think the more that we are blessed lots of times, it gives us just more capacity, more ability to be able to help others.
Yeah.
And that's something I've definitely realized in my own life. You have just less of that baggage, less of those things that that pull you away from being able to help other people.
Yeah, and I was thinking about we tend to romanticize the downtrodden because there's so many of us, and we all want to make that story naturally and things like that. And I do think that a lot of times when you come up against someone that hasn't had a really dark story in their life, there can be this trivializing of it, and feeling like that story doesn't necessarily matter as much as, someone that's gone through these horrible things or whatever,
Yep.
And I think you bring up a great point that I honestly think that that if we didn't have people that are that way, then there would be no hope for all of the
Mm-hmm.
people that are downtrodden,
Yep.
because, you get to see people that actually are living. At least that's how it worked in my life. Was, I honestly for a long time thought that everybody's family was messed up, and that, like, that ultimately there was no real true Christian family. There was no real true, happiness in
Mm-hmm.
that everybody really is in darkness and they're all just pretending to be light. And actually meeting examples in your life of people that are in the light is a great shock. Like it's something that I think the pessimist needs, because it's a logical representation of someone that's actually like living the Christian life well, and not necessarily that lying kind of person that you think they might be, and yeah, I think that more than anything, gives you.
Well, that was exactly going to be my next point, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Again, you summed it up quicker and better than I could have. I think one of the best aspects of that is that you can just serve to be an example for other people,
Mm-hmm.
for something that they can like want to strive for, want to push for, want to achieve. Sometimes when you've been so downtrodden, you just become convinced that those things don't exist. It's just a fairy tale.
Yep.
It's like if you are hoping that if you've always loved unicorns and you've never seen a unicorn, there's a certain point where you're just going to be like, well, it's just they don't exist or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of life change that would happen if you saw one that's what I think, striving to kind of live that upstanding life, and one of the great things I'm thankful for, being blessed by God lots of times, is that you can serve as that. You can serve as that hope for people sometimes. That there is a better way in a lot of those ways. And I've had different people say that, not as much recently with like me and my own immediate family right now, but growing up, I had a lot of my friends say that, where they would come over to my house to hang out with us, and they would just be like, I want it, like, you have a family that's like really loving each other, that's like honest about things. It's not, just kind of this fake thing that they do on the outside, but it's like a real part of how they live their lives. A lot of my friends would be attracted to that and want to come hang out at my house with my parents and all that kind of stuff. That's definitely one of my hopes, is that I can eventually be that for Toby's friends and other people like that too. But I think that's one of the best things that Christians can do, and I think that's one of the best ways to evangelize, period, is just kind of through that quiet example of living a faithful life and being a good representation of the kind of people that God wants us to be. There's just a great sort of aspirational thing for a lot of people who may be just so beaten down by the world that they are not even convinced if those actually exist. They're convinced that a loving family is just as fake as a unicorn, and so you kind of need to show them that, hey, it's possible. It is a thing that does exist in the world. It just kind of gives you that hope, and I think that hope is a big part of it. I think human beings are meant to like hope for these positive things. I think we need to have our lives oriented and pointed towards the things that bring us joy and happiness and hope. If it's just a component of how human beings are supposed to live.
Yeah.
And I think the proof of that is that anytime you do have those true pessimists, those people that are just like, it's all pointless. There's nothing to it. Life is meaningless. Life is pointless. Life is just pain. Most famously, all of the famous nihilist philosophers end up dying by suicide because they just give up hope. And when you give up hope, you just can't be a functioning, healthy human anymore, I don't think. And so one of the reasons, just to kind of bring it all the way back around, that I really think it's important, whether it's on social media, whether it's just with our friends, whether it is to sort of express our joys and the things that bring us joy, is that I think it can bring that positivity and hope to the people around us, give them something to point towards, give them something to hope for, give them a direction to go, to bring some of that own positivity into their life, even if in the current moment they are not experiencing that joy, even if they are currently in a dark season in their own life where they are experiencing a lot of heavy, deep, dark emotions, just giving them a direction to point and some hope to point towards.
Yeah, and I will
being really helpful.
And I will say that, like, I've known a lot of people that have been blessed with many things in their life, but have not really shared that with others. They've kept it very much in their own marriage and their own, community or whatever it is. And there is a difference between, I would say, people that have been very much blessed in life, who are willing to share that with the darker sides of people, like are willing to open up their homes to strangers even, and allow their family life to influence people that don't have that. And then there's other people that have that same joy in their own family life, but are very closed off and don't ever open up their homes to strangers. And to me, like, that just results a lot of times in people on the outside looking in, wishing to be a part of that, but not being able to. So I do think there's a responsibility for people in your case who have those blessings to people that don't have those blessings. I don't know. I just feel like that is not necessarily as preached as it could be.
Absolutely.
We talked about, like, helping the poor, we talked about, like, helping the poor, being blessed, even emotionally healthy, and being blessed with a great family, those types of things. When you realize that they are gifts of God, you don't want to just, like, bury that, and just use that on your own. You want to invest that in other people. Otherwise, you end up becoming the one-man talent man, right? You end up just, holding off. And so I don't know. I think that in a lot of ways, like you were saying earlier, there is a responsibility not just to enjoy the joy that you've been given, but also to spread that joy around,
Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, we both talked a little bit about how hospitality was something that's very important to the early church, and you see it it's a big deal in a lot of the Bible.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily something that gets talked about a lot in our modern context of the church.
Right.
And I think it's because when we read hospitality, we think that means, like, how much of a Martha Stewart are you? Like, are you good at making
Betty
appetizers
Crocker.
for people? Are you good at, But in my own life, some of the most hospitable people I've known have been the people that, like, come to the door in their pajamas and flip-flops, and they're like, refrigerator's right there. Help yourself to whatever you want. They don't make me any appetizers. They don't have, like, the perfectly put together house, but they're incredibly hospitable.
Yep.
And I think a lot of what hospitality means in the Bible is a version of taking whatever blessings God has given you and making sure that you share them with other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing to just push for. I think that's a great ideal to strive for all Christians. If Christians were really that sort of hospitable people that
elder requirements,
spiritual gifts as well.
Spiritual gifts. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was an elder requirement or not.
I can't remember at the moment, but either way, it's something that God can really use. And so, kind of as we're moving into the Christmas season, I just thought that, moving out of Advent and fully into the Christmas season, I just thought that this was I love this idea of just focusing in on those ways we can be joyful, hospitable, really opening up our homes to people, really opening up the joys and blessings in our lives, making sure that we share them. We don't just hoard them, like you were saying. And Christmas is one of those seasons where people can start to feel cynical and pessimistic about the joy and the sentimentality of it.
Yeah.
And so I think, especially with the Christmas season and all that, I would just challenge anybody who's listening, whether you're watching live with us now or listening later, maybe try to take this to heart. Try to really lean in.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to find a lot of benefits in it. I have certainly in my own life. So we're not completely done though. This upcoming Sunday will be our 4th Advent Sunday, and I would encourage you, tune in, watch us 7:00. We're live on Facebook, YouTube. We have a special guest preacher.
Yeah.
You'll have to tune in to see who that is.
Oh, you're not going to reveal it.
I'm not going to reveal it.
Okay.
Gotta keep it a secret. You got to tune in and see who the guest preacher is, but you're gonna love it so much
better. I have
better.
a feeling that everybody already knows.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But either way, if you don't know, it's a secret. You'll have to tune in and see. You'll get a reprieve from the Nick and Noah show that it's been for the last few months, and I'm excited about it. It'll be a kind of a cool end to this Advent season, and I think fully opening up of the joy of the Christmas season. So hopefully we can at least end 2020, a deep and dark year, with a joyful bang.
And if you wanted to see more of Nick playing guitar, he's also playing guitar this Sunday. So.
Yeah, should be fun. So tune in. We hope to see you then. Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.